6 p.m. in Fumban, that is in the Nous division of the West region of Cameroon. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me on today's edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast. For presentation, I am Immaculate Fogwe. The quest for a newborn baby or a new bed and a phone caused a lady to pour hot palm oil on her lover's face. The man whose face has been burnt beyond recognition is currently being hospitalized. The tragic incident occurred in Mabanda Bonaberi and has left many inhabitants in shock. The Post newspaper and its publisher have been suspended for a period of 1 month. This follows a headline on a survey by Afrobarometer considered as a threat to social peace in Cameroon. The suspension by the National Communication Council comes after the governor of the Southwest region shut down the paper's head office in Boya. Those are major stories. Stay with us for details and more. Once more, good evening, dear televiewers. Thank you so much for taking a rendezvous with us on today's edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast. A 39-year-old lady is being investigated at the Mabanda police station in the Douala 4 subdivision. She is accused of pouring hot palm oil on the body of her lover. The incident, according to the victim, sparked off from an argument and is still in Bonaberi. A woman was discovered dead in her home. The circumstances surrounding her death is still unclear. Malaglory has the details.
In pains and under intense treatment, Ayeri Siwe, a young man of about 40 years old, escaped death at Ancien Route, Bonaberi. He is a victim of a fight between him and his lover. According to his girlfriend, Malapa and Josiane, they got into an argument over him not building her bed and getting her a new phone. The argument turned physical and the girl ended up pouring hot palm oil on the married man. An action she says was out of anger. I asked him, "Are you happy seeing me lying on the floor? How can you tell me you will get me a new bed and not doing it?" He said I shouldn't disturb him. I seized his phone. That was when we started fighting, and out of anger I took the pot of oil from the fire and poured on him. Sadly for Malapa Ann, the hot palm oil poured on her as well. She says they separated 3 years ago and only nature brought them together. The young lady is presently at the Mabanda police station to answer to her crime. Still in Bonaberi, the body of a young woman was discovered in front of her home in Mabanda neighborhood. Aged 39, Michelle, as she was called, was living in her in-laws' compound with a little girl. According to the inhabitants, she was ill-treated by her in-laws. Security officers and medical personnel came here to investigate and carried the corpse to Bonasama. She lived here with a little girl while the husband lived in Yaoundé. Michelle's husband has been arrested for questioning why his late wife was transferred to the mortuary. However, investigations have been opened to uncover the real cause of her death.
And we stay in Douala, where the life of a newborn baby abandoned in a drainage at the Bipanda Bonabo neighborhood has been saved by doctors of the Lakentini Hospital. The baby was picked up by a man known as Aman Ditang and taken immediately to the hospital for checkup. As of now, the whereabouts of the mother is still unknown. We have details with our reporter, Smart Chikan Gabriel.
It was in a drainage in Bepanda Bonabo neighborhood of the Douala 5 subdivision that the newborn baby was discovered by Aman Ditsang. I was sitting beside the drainage when I heard the cry of a baby in a plastic bag. I took courage and got into the drainage, only for me to come out and discover that in the plastic bag it was a newborn baby. After taking away the baby from the drainage, he headed to the hospital for doctors to save the innocent child. With the heavy downpour, I took the child to the district hospital in Deito, where they asked me to go to Lakentini Hospital. When we arrived at Lakentini, the doctors cut off the umbilical cord. The results from the doctors were satisfactory, to this good Samaritan. The doctor's diagnosis showed that the child was in good shape. It was a girl child and all of her organs were intact. The only problem the doctors said she had was that she has been in cold for a long time. Unfortunately, the hope for a man to take care of the child were cut short. When I asked the doctor if I could pay the bills for the child and take her home, the doctor told me to go to the social affairs department. The little girl is now under good hands of the hospital, hoping to either reunite with her biological mother or to an adopted parent.
And now we talk something else. The Post newspaper has been suspended for a period of 1 month by the National Communication Council, NCC, in Yaoundé today. The sanction comes after the management was accused of perturbing public order in its Monday's online publication. We have details with Fomi Armstrong-Sander.
The 1 month sanction slapped on the Post newspaper by the National Communications Council in Cameroon only comes to define in duration the earlier decision of the Southwest Regional Governor, Bernard Okalia-Bilai. The move of the governor, according to some media personnel, was a glaring example of overzealousness.
The point is that the governor shot from the hip. Let me be very blunt. Let me call things by their name. To me, his action is like removing the ladder so that the birds should not perch on the roof. That was kind of a stupid thing to take. I mean, collectively stupid, whether it came from the governor.
Charlene Dicha also saw in it the hand of some overbearing administrators in Yaoundé.
I don't know, I think from his communique or what he signed, we learned that instructions came from a certain Minister of Communication, who is a Tanganji Paul. Let's look at the psychology of the rat when it is cornered. It fights back. When somebody is drowning, the person will want to drown with anything, with anyone, anybody near him. You see, this is a G3 system.
After deliberation in its ordinary session in Yaoundé, the National Communication Council says the Post newspaper and its editor-in-chief have been suspended for a period of 1 month, upholding the initial decision of the governor of the Southwest region, qualified by many as controversial.
And let's now take this communique in relation to the sanction given to the Post newspaper by the National Communication Council. And following the publication on the 11th of September 2023 on the front page headline on social media by the Post newspaper bearing the information likely to disrupt national cohesion and social peace, the council, after ascertaining the responsibility of the organ in question to acknowledging the following: the online publication was uploaded by an employee without the authorization of the publisher. This publication differs from the front page of the same paper that was released on 11th of September 2023, and the publisher of the Post newspaper sanctioned the offending employee and the editor-in-chief for carelessness. The same communique says the publisher of the said newspaper issued a denial of the disputed publication in a press release on Facebook page by the offending media organ. The council, considering the above and given that the aforementioned arguments do not exempt the professional responsibility of the publisher offending newspaper, has decided to suspend the Post newspaper and Mr. Samsi Vanus Kini from the duties as publisher and as exercising the profession of journalist in Cameroon for a period of 1 month. And still in connection to that, let's now get to the genesis of the issue concerning the Post newspaper with our reporter Annabella, who spoke with the editor or the publisher or the editor-in-chief of the Post newspaper in Boya in her report.
Bi-weekly newspaper The Post, one of the most prominent English newspapers in Cameroon, received sanctions from the governor of the Southwest region, Bernard Okalia-Bilai. The root cause is the front page of last Monday's edition of the newspaper, which insinuates that 66% of Cameroonians are for a military coup d'etat. The Southwest Administrative Boss, in his communique banning the publication and distribution of the Boya-based newspaper in the Southwest, accuses management of perturbing public order. The editor-in-chief of the Post newspaper, Budi Adams, says it was a leaked soft copy on social media and was not the final edition.
After we realized what was happening, we sent out a communique saying that this is the authentic edition, and we sent the edition out. So we received it, just like readers, with a lot of shock.
Before the communique of the Southwest Governor, the National Communication Council, which is the organ to regulate press excesses or offences in Cameroon, had called the attention of the Post newspaper on the controversial headline of the paper's soft copy. The Post, which is a bi-weekly newspaper, was founded in 1997, having as pioneer publisher and editor-in-chief the late Francis Wati and Charlene Diche, respectively. Over the years, the paper has stood the test of time and is considered by readers as one of the most credible and prominent newspapers in Cameroon.
And over to politics, a fight broke out among UPC members in the Zeka Nyoankele division of the Central region during the commemoration of the UPC party. It should be recalled that the founder of the UPC party, Ruben Omniobe, was murdered by the French army near his natal village of Bumyebel, Central region of Cameroon, 65 years ago. Asia Lucy Liango in her report tells us what sparked the misunderstanding between party members.
At the APC cemetery in Ezeka, UPC party members converged on the grave of the emblematic figure Ruben Omniobe to commemorate his 65th anniversary. Ruben Omniobe was assassinated by the French army while he fought fearlessly for the freedom and independence of Cameroon. In the course of the celebration, a 30-minute quarrel broke out between the UPC party members. This called for the attention of the APC church leaders who descended on the scene to calm down both parties. If your presence here is coordinated by the Secretary General, then I will say you had a wrong indication of the place. On his grave, his family, UPC members, sang songs of praise and worship and equally prayed for the peaceful repose of the hero who was murdered 2 years before Cameroon gained its independence.
La victoire du combat de Ruben Omniobe.
The victory of Ruben Omniobe will forever be in our hearts because he gave his life for the independence of Cameroon. His family members say they remember him as a martyr and main actor in the fight for Cameroon's independence. They wish the population follow his footsteps.
We
wish our grandchildren, even our children, the young people, follow this history of Cameroon in remembrance of what he did. Ruben Omniobe was born on April 10, 1913. He became known as a trade unionist before creating in 1948 in Douala the Union of the Peoples of Cameroon, UPC, a nationalist party. Omniobe was assassinated on the 13th of September 1958 near his natal village in Bumyebel in the Nyoankele division.
And the wife of Omniobe died yesterday, the same day when her husband died 65 years ago. May his soul rest in peace. And away from that, we now take you out of our national borders. There are fears that the death toll of the catastrophic flood in Libya could increase to 20,000 persons. The mayor of eastern Libya port city of Derna estimates that at least 18,000 to 20,000 people have died. Away from Libya, Niger's junta has released a French official who was held in captivity for 5 days. The arrest of Stéphane Julien heightened tension between France and Niger. We have details with Cedric Chakucho.
In Niger, Stéphane Julien is an elected official who represents French expatriates and works in close collaboration with the embassies and consulates of Niger. He was arrested on Tuesday by the Nigerian authorities, an arrest that was condemned by Paris, which requested his release. On the day of his release, while he was moving to his vehicle, he was shouted upon by the Nigerians. Over to Libya, The situation is tragic in the Libyan town of Susa, located in the Mediterranean coast in the east of the country. Since Storm Daniel, submerging in rainwater, making it impossible to resume relief operations by land. The only mountain road connected Susa to the neighboring town of Shatat was completely destroyed after it collapsed. The city also suffered a complete loss of power and communication on Wednesday. 3 days have passed since 2 dams have collapsed during the storm, flooding nearby areas. For now, no government party visited the city to see the scale of the tragedy and send rescue teams. The number of people killed in the floods that devastated Derna in the northern east of Libya could reach 20,000, said the town's mayor on Wednesday. Faced with the tragedy, international mobilization is identifying to help survivors. The European Commission notably announced the sending of aid from Germany, Romania and Finland.
And now we talk sports. At least 12 former winners of the African Nations Cup have qualified for the AFCON, with Cameroon hoping to win the trophy just like they did in 1984 when Ivory Coast hosted the tournament. Smart Jikangable takes a look at the qualified teams for the African Nations Cup to hold in Ivory Coast.
The West African nations will be the most represented at the African Nations Cup that will be hosted by Ivory Coast come January 2024. Even though no nation can be considered as an underdog, Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, the Gambia and Equatorial Guinea are seen as the little nations that could produce setups at the showpiece event. If in Cameroon we had the Gambia participating for the first time, Ivory Coast won't see any debutant, as all 24 teams participating have played in at least one of the tournament. It will be the Gambia's second consecutive appearance at the competition after their sensational participation at the AFCON in Cameroon. Football lovers already see nations like defending champions Senegal, most crowned nation in Africa, Egypt, and FIFA World Cup semi-finalist Morocco as the pre-tournament favorites. Cameroon, Nigeria, Ghana and Tunisia are other nations who could spring surprises. History will have it that Nigeria's striker Victor Osimhen ended the qualifiers as top scorer with 10 goals, while Cameroon waited for the last minute to get their qualification ticket against Burundi. Many are now asking if Cameroon will be back on top of Africa's football with a win in Ivory Coast. Cameroon, should be recalled, won the 1984 tournament hosted by Ivory Coast. Draw for the AFCON 2023 will be done in Ivory Coast on October 12, 2023, with hostilities expected to start on January 13, 2024.
And still in sports, the 2025 edition of the Senior Men's World Volleyball Championship will be played in the absence of Cameroon. The Volleyball Lions missed out to Libya during the third-place game, while Egypt won the 24th edition of the Men's African Nations Volleyball Tournament they organized. A review of the tournament that ended on Wednesday with our sports reporter, Smart Jikangable.
Cameroon's senior men's volleyball team won't be part of the Men's World Volleyball Championship in 2025. The Volleyball Lions missed out at the tournament as they were beaten at the classification match for the third place in the African Nations Volleyball Tournament in Egypt. Libya defeated Cameroon 3-1, 22-25, 25-22, 25-23 and 25-15. It was Cameroon's second defeat at the tournament after losing to Egypt at the level of the semi-final. The Pharaohs of Egypt are the winners of the 24th edition of the Senior Men's African Nations Volleyball Championship. The Egyptian volleyball team defeated Algeria at the final of the competition by 3-1 in a thrilling North African final at the Cairo Stadium. At the Senior Men's World Volleyball Championship in 2025, a trio of North African nations will represent Africa. Amongst them are champions Egypt, runners-up Algeria, and third-placed Libya.
That's it for the first part of the news. Talking Point is up next. In today's edition of Talking Point, I'll be receiving Sama Abang Mungwa. He is a social critic and equally a teacher based in the southwest region of Cameroon. Good evening to you, Sama Abang Mungwa. It's almost 2 weeks after school resumption. How effective are classes in the town of Boya, especially now that separatist fighters have imposed a 2-week lockdown?
Hello, Immaculate. Thank you for having me on your program, Talking Point. It's my pleasure to be your guest on your show. Yeah, it's almost 2 weeks now since schools resumed for the academic year 2023-2024. And in the town of Boya, as your question requires, it's a mitigated situation. Mitigated because in confessional boarding schools, it's 100% effective. But with these schools, be they lay private or public schools, it's a deplorable situation. I must say that most schools picked up effectively on the first and second days, but then after, we are aware of the events that unfolded in the locality of Munya and Moliko, which sent fear waves across the spines of every school stakeholders. Ever since then, I should say it's less than 10% effective schooling. We can't say we have been going to school. It's a deplorable situation, I must say, especially with day schools in the town of Boya and its environment.
Now, tell us, are you not worried about your safety and that of students? Is it not advisable for everyone to stay home in such a critical period?
Everybody in such difficult situations would definitely be their own security agent. And so everybody is responsible for their own security. We cannot expect the state to offer maximum security to each and every citizen. And so we must listen to the different voices, be they the voice of caution, the voice of reason, the voice of fear, and the voice of intimidation. We must be cautious enough to listen to all of those voices and take personal security and safety measures to guarantee the safety and security of ourselves and our children and our students and our families. I cannot tell you a lie that we are not mindful of the threats and the intimidations. We have been targets and victims of this ever since the onset of this crisis. And so we are very mindful of where we go to, when we go to places, those we meet, how we talk, what we say. And so again, as I said, we are quite careful, we are quite vigilant, and we are quite prayerful.
Now, how do you manage to balance your personal safety with your commitment to students and their education?
As much as I have an obligation to teach, because I have a commitment towards my students and the nation and the state, that is my employer, and I have that commitment towards my students and the community and God, above all God. We also understand the fact that it is only a teacher who is alive who will be able to teach. A dead teacher does not teach, and so I will need to stay alive so that I will be able to teach another day and for many more days, than for me to be negligent and careless with security measures. My students would only live to talk about me in the past tense, but I think that I still have quite some time to fulfill my commitment with the state. Our boys tell us not to teach on Mondays. Personally, Immaculate, let me tell you, I don't go to school on Mondays. Even if I am programmed, I don't go to school on Mondays. My minister said we should not teach on Saturdays, so we have to be innovative and we improvise and see whether we can teach on Sundays, or in some schools the teaching periods extend right up to 6 p.m. That is how innovative we have become, and that's how we are able to manage the security risks and threats with the commitment that we know we have towards our students and the state and other stakeholders.
The Minister of Secondary Education in a communique announced that anyone is allowed to report teachers who are absent. What's your take about the outing of the minister?
Pertaining to the minister's attempt, I think that it wasn't really, we seem to have misconstrued it. The minister's attempt wasn't like targeting absentee teachers in the real sense, in the general sense of teachers' absences, but it was aimed at targeting colleagues who are not in the country or who have outrightly abandoned duties and abandoned their places of work, but are still receiving salary. So it was like an effort to get colleagues on the ground who have perfect knowledge of the realities of who is teaching, who has not been teaching, who has traveled out of the country, who has abandoned work and is doing some other thing, but is still collecting salary. So it wasn't really to target absentee teachers per se, but I think that it was in the spirit of engaging in this fight against ghost workers in her ministry. As much as we know that it was considered as reducing the ministry and teachers to a Congo-style ministry, where information which ought to have been gotten through the formal administrative channels of gathering information now has to be submitted to her through Congo-style channels, as I would say. But again, I wouldn't blame her in her very desperate efforts to ensure that she fights against ghost workers in her ministry. She might have taken a step that is unorthodox, but again, I have very little quarrel with her as regards that. I still just think that she would resort to the orthodox means of information gathering rather than reducing the ministry to some gossip and Congo-style meal as it was the case. But I still think that it was a worthwhile intention which was misconstrued and which I think should be looked at again so that we don't reduce an entire ministry to some informal Cartier Jangi group of Congo-style networking, I should say.
Sama Abang-Mungwa, a social critic based in the town of Boya, that is in the southwest region of Cameroon. And that's what put an end to today's edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe Television. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your keen attention. Stay in the company of more interesting programs on ETV and stay in the company of Serge Alain Otto, the program Equinoxe. See you soon.